My name is Tobias. I was born a slave on Magnolia Grove Plantation in Alabama in the year 1831. For 23 years, I lived as property. I plowed the fields, fixed the wagons, and carried scars across my back that told every story my master wanted forgotten. He believed my silence was proof of obedience. But inside, silence only hid fire. Then came Catherine, his only daughter, 17 years old, pale as porcelain, with hair like sunlight. She should have been my master's most distant star. Yet one morning in the garden, she looked at me not as property, but as a man. We spoke in whispers. We carried questions that could get us both killed. And in those questions, love took root. That love was stronger than law, stronger than chains. And on one December night in 1854, it demanded blood. Her fiancé fell to the floor, his life spilling across her white dress. From that moment, we were not just lovers. We were fugitives. Every mile north left another body behind us. Subscribe and comment your state below. Would you have risked it all for love that the world called forbidden? I was born in bondage, but my life began in ink. A ledger recorded, male child, sound, $400. That was all I was in 1831. Magnolia Grove was a grand plantation. 300 slaves bound to one man's will. Cotton stretched across the land like endless white seas. Tobacco filled the barns in autumn. From a distance, it looked rich, calm, and beautiful. But up close, it smelled of sweat, smoke, and blood. The big house stood tall with its white pillars and polished floors. Guests came to admire the chandeliers, the piano, the fine china. They never walked down to the cabins. Those were cramped boxes of pine, smoky from cooking fires, damp in the rain, freezing in the winter. That was the world I knew. Our days began before the sun when the bell rang. Children fetched water, women cooked meals they rarely tasted. Men marched to the fields, bent until their backs felt carved from stone. Nights brought little rest, only coughing babies, tired bodies on straw, and the constant fear of who might be sold next. Master William Thornfield ruled it all. He was tall, broad, with gray at his temples and cruelty carved into his smile. To visitors, he was a gentleman. To us, he was the whip and the law. On Sundays, he read scripture about obedience, twisting God's word into chains. By 10, I was pushing a plow. By 20, I was repairing wagons, shoeing horses, and cleaning pistols. My skills made me valuable. I ate a little better, was whipped a little less. But privilege is another kind of chain. A trusted slave is still a slave. The scars on my back told the real story. Some from slowing down, some from looking too long, and the deepest for teaching myself letters. By candlelight, I traced words from a Bible I wasn't meant to touch. When Master found out, he ordered me whipped until the skin broke open. The blood healed, but the words stayed. Words can never be whipped away. For years, I thought survival was enough. Work steady, speak little, hide the fire inside your chest. That was the only way to live. Catherine's world seemed different, but in truth, she was caged too. She wore silk gowns, walked polished floors, dined on silver plates, but her life was planned for her. What to say, how to smile, and who to marry. She was a bird in a golden cage, staring at the same sky I longed for. Our worlds were meant to run side by side, never touching. She human, me property. But laws are only words on paper, and paper burns. It was in the garden that the first spark jumped across the cages. If your life was written in a ledger, would you accept the price, or look for the door they swore did not exist? The garden at Magnolia Grove was meant to show beauty. Roses lined the path, jasmine climbed the fences, and trimmed hedges told every visitor that Master Thornfield's wealth reached even into the soil. To me, the garden was just another place of labor. I dug the beds, hauled water, and clipped vines under the Alabama sun. It was there, among roses and jasmine, that Catherine first spoke to me. She asked about the flowers. Her voice was light, curious. "How long before they bloom?" she said. I answered carefully. "Depends on the sun, miss." She smiled, nodded, and walked on. But her smile was different from the others. It did not carry pity. It did not carry command. It carried recognition. Days turned into weeks. She came again and again, early mornings when the heat had not yet drowned the air. At first, her questions were small, about weather, soil, or seeds. But then she asked, "Do you ever wonder what lies beyond these fences, beyond Alabama? My chest tightened. Questions like that could end a man's life. I kept my eyes low. Yes, miss. Everybody wonders. She looked at me then as though she had found a secret in plain sight. Her blue eyes did not see a slave. They saw a man. Our conversations grew deeper. She told me about books she read in secret, writings that spoke against slavery, sermons her father would have burned. She had been taught French, Latin, philosophy, things no Southern lady was supposed to know. She had questions about the world, about freedom, about equality. I told her about auctions, about families torn apart on blocks, about mothers screaming as children were carried away. I told her about scars on backs that never healed, about the silence a man carried so he would not be broken. She listened not with pity but with anger. She said it was wrong. She said it was madness to call chains God's plan. One morning, she stood by the jasmine vines, her fingers brushing the leaves. "Sometimes I think I could walk away," she whispered. "From this house, from this life, from everything. If only I had someone to walk with." Her words struck me harder than any whip, because I knew what she meant. And I knew who she meant. From that day, the garden was no longer just a place of labor. It was the only place in the world where we were both free. Each word we spoke was dangerous. Each smile was treason. But we kept speaking. We kept smiling. Love grew there in the soil of Magnolia Grove, watered by silence and risk. We never said the word aloud, but it burned between us, bright and undeniable. If you stood in that garden, would you have stayed silent or dared to answer her? The news reached me not from the master, but from Martha, the old nurse who had raised Catherine since she was a child. She found me by the well one morning, her hands shaking as she whispered, "They're bringing James Braxton up from Mobile. The Christmas ball will announce the marriage." The rope slipped in my grip. The bucket fell, splashing water across the dust. I stared at her, unable to breathe. Catherine promised to another man. I had always known the day would come. But knowing is not the same as feeling the knife twist. James Braxton was heir to one of Alabama's richest families. His people owned sugar fields, ships, and hundreds of slaves. A match with the Thornfields would unite two empires. Catherine would become his wife, his possession. And me? I would return to silence, forced to watch from the shadows. That evening, the big house buzzed like a hive. Servants polished silver until it gleamed. Dresses were stitched with French lace. Carriages rolled in, carrying guests from across the state. Every candle, every ribbon whispered the same message. The master's daughter is no longer free, but the garden told a different truth. Catherine came to me that night, her cloak wrapped tight against the cold. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned. "They will sell me into a cage," she said. "Not with chains, but with vows. They will take my voice, my future, my life, and I will not let them." Her words hit like thunder. The silence between us broke, and the fire we had buried in whispers rose to the surface. For the first time, we spoke of escape. At first, it was only a thought, wild and impossible, but it grew with every word. Horses swift enough to outrun pursuers, gold to buy passage, disguises to hide who she was, weapons for the dangers we would face. I told her the truth. If we run, we will be hunted. They will not stop. Her voice did not shake. Then let them hunt. I would rather run with you than live silent with him. Under the bare branches of that winter garden, our fates were sealed. There was no turning back. Love had become rebellion. Rebellion would demand blood. If you were Catherine, would you obey your father's will, or risk your life for forbidden love? The nights grew colder, and so did our patience. Every passing day brought the Christmas ball closer, the night when Catherine's cage would close forever. We had little time, and so our whispers in the garden turned into plans. I had knowledge that most slaves never gained. Years of repairing wagons, tending horses, and maintaining the master's firearms had given me skills and access. I knew which horses were swiftest, which rifles never misfired, and where the keys to the strongbox were kept. These were not just tools of labor anymore. They would become the tools of freedom. Catherine brought her own part. From her father's rooms, she began to slip out small pieces of jewelry, rings, and gold coins. She hid them in her dress hems and tucked them beneath floorboards in the garden shed. "If money buys silence, we will have enough," she whispered. But escape meant more than horses and gold. It meant disguises, Catherine practiced speaking in a lower tone, rougher, like a farmer's wife. She darkened her hands with walnut dye, so her skin would not shine pale under lanterns. At first she laughed nervously at her own reflection, but soon the laughter faded. She understood this was no game. I studied maps stolen from the library, roads that led north, back trails through Tennessee, crossings over the Ohio River. I traced them by candlelight, memorizing every bend, every creek. The safest routes were the most dangerous, for patrols guarded them. The hardest paths through mountains offered our best chance. We agreed. The night of the Christmas ball would be our cover. The master would be busy entertaining guests. Catherine would dance, smile, and excuse herself early. I would wait at the servants' entrance with the horses and weapons ready. If everything went right, we would be miles away before anyone noticed. But even as we planned, I felt the shadow of blood. Pursuers would come. Rewards would be posted. Men would chase us not for duty but for gold, and gold can make men into hounds. One night I asked her, "Are you ready for what may come? For the things I may have to do?" Her eyes did not waver. "I am ready. I would rather die free with you than live chained without you." Those words bound us tighter than any vow a priest could give. We were not just planning to run. We were planning to fight if fighting was the only way forward. The ball was only days away. The candles were being polished, the silver laid out. The house was ready to celebrate a marriage. But beneath it all, two hearts prepared for war. If every road to freedom promised blood, would you still take the first step? December 23rd, 1854. Magnolia Grove shone brighter than I had ever seen. Carriages lined the road. Lanterns glowed from every window of the big house. The music of violins drifted across the night air. Guests laughed, drank, and toasted to Catherine's engagement, never knowing she had already chosen another fate. Inside, the house smelled of wine and roasted meat. Servants hurried with silver trays, careful not to spill. Catherine glided across the ballroom in a gown of white silk, her golden hair pinned high. To every guest, she looked the perfect bride-to-be. To me, waiting in the shadows of the servants' hall, she was something else entirely. My partner in flight. I moved through the house quietly, checking every detail. In the stables, the horses were saddled and restless. In my saddlebag lay pistols, a rifle, and enough ammunition for a war. The strongbox gold weighed heavy, not just in coin but in consequence. Every item carried the same truth. Tonight, we broke the world. The plan was simple. Catherine would excuse herself early, claiming fatigue. She would slip from her room through the servants' entrance where I waited. Together we would ride north, hidden by the chaos of celebration. But plans rarely survive the night. James Braxton followed Catherine upstairs. Whether from desire or suspicion, I never learned. He entered her room, closing the door behind him. From the stable window, I saw the candlelight flicker in her chamber and felt the first stab of fear. She was trapped. I could have waited. I could have hoped he would leave. But love had turned me into something else. Something dangerous. My feet carried me into the house through the kitchen door. Up the back stairs I knew as well as my own scars. I entered silently. Braxton stood at the window, speaking soft words to Catherine. His back was turned. He never heard me come. My knife was swift and the blood came faster than a scream. He crumpled at her feet, red spilling across the fine carpet. Catherine gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Her gown was stained in crimson, but her eyes met mine with terrible clarity. We had crossed the line. There was no return. "Now," I whispered. "We go now?" She nodded, trembling, but her hands moved with purpose. She stripped away the blood-stained gown, changed into the riding clothes we had hidden. Together we slipped through the servants' entrance, the ballroom music still echoing as if nothing had changed. But everything had. The night air was sharp as we mounted the horses. The first miles disappeared beneath hooves pounding the dirt road. Behind us the house blazed with light and laughter, but inside lay a corpse. By dawn, pursuit would begin. By dawn, we would be killers and fugitives. If one death stood between you and freedom, would you raise the knife, or let love be buried alive? The night swallowed us as our horses tore down the back road. Frost bit at our faces. Every hoofbeat carried us farther from Magnolia Grove and closer to the edge of the world we had known. At first, there was only the sound of wind and the rhythm of hooves. Catherine rode steady, her cloak pressed tight around her, her face pale but resolute. I watched the road and the stars, guiding us north by memory. For a moment I dared to believe we might outrun fate, but before 20 miles had passed, fate found us. A patrol of men rode up the same road, half drunk from their own Christmas feasts. They carried rifles slung across their shoulders, lanterns swaying in the dark. At their head was Caleb Morrison, overseer of a neighboring plantation, a man who had known Catherine since childhood. He reined his horse across our path, blocking the way. "Miss Catherine Thornfield," he called, suspicion dripping from every word. "What are you doing out here at this hour, with one of your daddy's nags?" His men chuckled, shifting in their saddles. Hands moved toward rifles. My pulse roared in my ears. I did not speak. My pistol did. The first shot dropped Morrison from his saddle, his chest exploding crimson under the lantern glow. Chaos broke loose. Catherine's horse reared as the other men drew their weapons. I fired again and another man tumbled into the dirt. The gunfire lit the road like lightning. Catherine held the reins steady, eyes wide but unbroken, as I turned our flight into battle. In less than 2 minutes it was over. 5 men lay dead on the cold Alabama road. The silence that followed was heavier than the gun smoke. Our horses stamped nervously, their breaths clouds in the night air. Catherine looked at me, not with horror but with something harder. Her voice trembled, but it carried strength. "Is this what we will become?" I wiped the blood from my knife, slid the pistol back into my belt. "This is what we must become if we want to live," she swallowed, then nodded. "Then we ride forward." We left the bodies cooling in the dirt, lanterns still burning beside them. Behind us lay Magnolia Grove. Before us stretched Tennessee, Kentucky, and the long road north. Every mile would be hunted. Every mile might demand more blood, but the choice was made. If freedom demanded you spill blood on a lonely road, would you fire the shot or surrender to the chains? By Christmas morning, the whole county knew. Word traveled faster than hooves, carried from plantation to plantation, from tavern to church porch. Catherine Thornfield, the master's daughter, had vanished into the night with her father's most trusted slave, and James Braxton, heir of mobile wealth, lay dead in her bedroom. The news spread like wildfire. Some whispered it was seduction, others claimed abduction, but all agreed on one thing. This was a crime the South could not forgive. Master Thornfield's rage was said to be unlike anything men had seen. He posted rewards large enough to tempt every poor white farmer, every bounty hunter, every man with a gun and a horse. Posters were nailed to trees and tavern doors. $5,000 for the return of Tobias and Catherine, dead or alive. We felt the weight of that price as we rode. Every stranger's glance became a threat. Every farmhouse light in the distance could be a snare. We moved by night, resting in abandoned barns, slipping through woods and creeks to hide our trail. But gold makes hounds out of men. It was only days before the first found us. We stopped by a creek to water the horses. Catherine knelt beside the stream, her cloak pulled tight. I scanned the trees. That was when I saw him. A lone rider, slow, deliberate, eyes locked on us. His name was Marcus Webb, a bounty hunter known for tracking fugitive slaves. He carried a rifle across his lap. His mouth curled into a confident grin. He believed we would fetch him a fortune. I raised my pistol. "Stay back," I warned. He chuckled. "Easy, boy. You come quiet, no one else has to bleed." Catherine gripped my arm. I saw the fear in her eyes, but behind it was trust. She was waiting for me to decide. I fired. The bullet caught Webb between the eyes. He tumbled backward off his horse, dead before he hit the ground. His body slid into the creek, the current carrying his blood downstream. Catherine did not scream. She simply stood, breathing hard, her jaw set. "How many more?" she asked quietly. "As many as it takes," I said. "Every man who hunts us has chosen his reward over his life. If they fall, the blame is theirs," she nodded. The fear in her eyes hardened into resolve. She was no longer just the master's daughter. She was my partner on the road of blood. That night, we rode deeper into Tennessee, leaving Marcus Webb's corpse to the water and the crows. Behind us, the hunt grew louder. Ahead of us, the mountains waited. If the world hunted you for gold, would you run forever or turn and strike first? The Tennessee mountains rose before us like jagged teeth. The trails were narrow, frozen, and steep, but they gave us what we needed most: Cover. Pursuers with fresh horses could outrun us on the open road, but not here. In the mountains, every bend was a shield, and every shadow could be a weapon. By New Year's, we knew the hunt had grown sharper. The men chasing us were no longer drunk farmers or desperate wanderers. They were professionals, slave catchers who traveled with rifles, chains, and dogs trained to follow human scent across rivers and stone. Their leader was a man named Josiah Blackwood, a name whispered with fear even among fugitives. We first heard his dogs before we saw him, the deep, cruel baying echoing through the trees. Catherine froze, her hand tightening on the reins. "They're close," she whispered. I led us into a narrow pass we had crossed days earlier. I knew its shape. High cliffs, a funnel that forced men to ride in single file. Here numbers would count for less. Here the hunter could be hunted. We climbed above the trail, rifles ready. Catherine's face was pale, but her eyes burned steady. I handed her a pistol. "If they reach me, don't hesitate," I said. She nodded without a word. At dawn, Blackwood's men entered the pass. First came the dogs, straining at their leashes, their noses to the frozen ground. Then the riders, a dozen in all, rifles across their backs, eyes scanning the cliffs. Blackwood rode at the front, tall, broad-shouldered with a scar across his cheek. His voice was calm, confident, as if he already owned us. The first shot cracked like thunder. One rider fell from his horse before he even knew death was coming. Catherine fired next, her bullet striking true. Panic tore through their line as echoes bounced off the cliffs. The dogs snarled, pulling forward, but the riders shouted, confused, firing blindly into stone and snow. I aimed carefully, each shot counting, each man dropping into the narrow dirt trail below. The pass turned into chaos, horses rearing, men shouting, the sound of steel against stone. But Blackwood was no ordinary hunter. He dismounted, crouching low, his rifle steady, his eyes scanning the rocks. He fired, and the bullet tore across my ribs, hot and sharp. Pain seared through me, but I kept firing. Catherine's hands shook, yet her aim held true. Then came her moment. Blackwood raised his rifle to finish me, but Catherine's shot struck his chest. He staggered, dropped to his knees, then fell face first into the snow. The dogs howled, masterless. The surviving men fled, leaving weapons and gear behind. Silence returned to the pass. Smoke rose from our barrels. Blood stained the snow, and my ribs burned with fire. Catherine pressed her hand to my wound, her own shoulder bleeding from a graze. Yet her eyes met mine with something fierce. We were still alive. And Blackwood, the terror of fugitives, was not. If the hunters cornered you in the mountains, would you fight or surrender to the chains? The mountains carried us into Kentucky, but winter carried its own dangers. Snow fell heavy, the kind that swallowed sound and left the world gray and still. The cold cut sharper than any whip. Our horses stumbled on ice, their breaths turning white in the frozen air. My ribs ached from Blackwood's bullet. Every movement burned. Catherine's shoulder was wrapped in cloth, stained where blood still seeped. We were alive, but not whole, and winter does not wait for the wounded. We found shelter in a small cabin near a frozen creek. Smoke rose from its chimney, and for a moment I feared it belonged to men who would trade our lives for Thornfield's gold. But it belonged to Samuel Jackson, a free black man, and his wife, Mary. Samuel was a blacksmith, his hands thick with callus, his eyes sharp with memory. He had once been enslaved, but had bought his freedom years before. Mary had been born free in Pennsylvania. Together they lived quiet but careful, always watched, always wary. When they saw Catherine beside me, pale and trembling, they knew who we were. Yet Samuel did not reach for chains. He opened his door. "Come in," he said simply. Inside, the fire burned warm. We ate bread and stew, our first hot meal in weeks. Catherine's face softened in the glow, but her eyes never lost their watchfulness. Even in kindness, danger lurked. We all knew it. At night, Samuel spoke low. "The bounty on your heads grows each day. $5,000 now. Hunters will come, and they won't stop at the Ohio. But I know people. Folks who move souls north, through Ohio, Indiana, into Canada." Mary placed her hand on Catherine's. "It won't be easy. The river is frozen, the patrol's thick, but it can be done. If you live long enough to try." Catherine listened, nodding. She was no longer the master's sheltered daughter. Her hands were rough, her cloak torn, her eyes hardened by what she had seen. "We will make it," she said quietly. We didn't come this far to stop. For weeks we stayed in that cabin. Snow piled against the door, winds howled against the walls, and the world outside froze. Samuel mended my ribs. Mary dressed Catherine's wound. We healed in body, but in spirit we sharpened. Each day Samuel brought word of hunters nearby, men with dogs, rifles, and greed in their eyes. They'll find this place eventually, he warned. When they do, they won't just kill you. They'll burn me too. I knew he was right. Safety was a shadow that never stayed. To survive, we would need to move again northward toward the river, toward Canada. But this time, Catherine did not speak of running. She spoke of fighting. We cannot always be prey, she whispered. Sometimes we must hunt. Her words chilled me more than the snow. But I knew she was right. If strangers offered you shelter but warned it would cost their lives, would you stay or keep running into the storm? By February, the snow began to soften, but the hunt grew harder. Word came from Samuel. Professional trackers had joined the chase. Men with dogs, maps, and money behind them. They weren't poor farmers chasing a reward. They were killers by trade. Catherine listened to Samuel's warnings by the fire, her face lit in orange glow. She no longer looked like the pampered girl who once strolled Magnolia Grove's gardens. Her hands were calloused, her eyes colder. Running has kept us alive, she said quietly. But running will not finish this. We must make them fear us. At first I resisted. For months survival had been our only thought. Hide, ride, keep moving north. But I knew she was right. Hunters chose the time and place, driving us like hounds drive deer. To live, we had to change the game. We studied the mountain trails we had crossed weeks earlier. Sharp bends, narrow ridges, places where numbers counted for nothing. Catherine traced the map with her finger. Here, she said. This pass, we know it. They don't. For days we prepared. Samuel gave us supplies. Powder, lead, and food wrapped tight. You kill the right man, he said, and the rest may scatter. His words carried weight. He had seen too much to believe otherwise. The morning we left, the air was clear and cruel. Frost cracked under the horses' hooves. My ribs ached. Catherine's shoulder burned, but we rode with purpose. We were not prey anymore. We were hunters. At dawn, their party entered the pass. A dozen men, dogs straining at the leash. Josiah Blackwood had fallen, but others had risen to claim the bounty. They moved with confidence, laughing, their breath clouds in the air. We waited above, rifles steady, hearts pounding. Catherine's eyes were sharp as the barrel in her hands. No hesitation remained. The first volley tore through them. Men dropped from their saddles, dogs howling, horses rearing in panic. The narrow trail turned into chaos. Shouts echoed, bullets cracked against stone. Catherine reloaded with quick, steady hands, firing again. Her shot struck a man in the throat. He collapsed, blood steaming in the snow. I fired, reloaded, fired again. Each shot found its mark. But the hunters were skilled. They scrambled for cover, firing back, the smell of powder choking the pass. A bullet grazed Catherine's cheek, another tore through my coat. For hours, the pass became a battlefield. When silence finally fell, the snow was red. Half their number lay dead, the rest fled, leaving gear and weapons behind. The dogs whimpered, masterless. Catherine stood, her pistol smoking, her hair loose and wild. She looked at me not with fear, but with grim certainty. Now they will know, she said. We are not prey, she was right. That day, the hunters became the hunted. If you were driven to the edge, would you keep running? Or turn the mountains into your battlefield? By March, the snow began to thaw, and with it came our chance. Samuel's wife, Mary, whispered of a crossing on the Ohio River, a place where the ice was breaking, watched by patrols, but still passable with courage. Beyond it lay Ohio, and beyond Ohio, the road to Canada. The journey to the river was slow. My ribs still ached from old wounds, and Catherine carried scars of her own. Yet we pressed on, traveling by night, hiding by day. Each farmhouse we passed felt like an eye watching. Each bark of a dog made our hands fly to weapons. At last we reached the riverbank. The Ohio stretched wide before us, chunks of ice drifting like broken teeth. The current roared beneath, swift and merciless. Freedom was there across the water, so close I could taste it. But between us and that shore rode men with lanterns. Patrols paid to catch souls like ours. Catherine looked at me, her cloak pulled tight, her face pale but unshaken. We have come too far to stop, she whispered. We waited until the patrol passed, their voices fading into the night. Then we led the horses into the freezing water. The current bit into us like knives. Ice slammed against our legs, pushing, pulling, trying to drag us under. Halfway across, a shout split the night. Lanterns flared on the far bank. Rifles cracked, bullets hissing into the dark. One struck the water so close it sprayed into my face. "Go!" I shouted. Catherine gritted her teeth, urging her horse forward. The animal snorted, eyes wild, but pressed on. We fought the current, the cold sinking into our bones. Another shot rang out and Catherine cried out, the bullet grazing her arm. I fired back blindly, sparks lighting the night. One of the patrolmen fell, his lantern plunging into the river. Darkness swallowed us again. The horses lunged, their hooves striking solid ground. We staggered onto the far bank, shivering, soaked to the bone. Behind us, the river roared, carrying away the blood and the fire of that night. Catherine collapsed onto the grass, her breath coming in sharp bursts. I knelt beside her, holding her tight, feeling her heart still beating fast against my chest. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "We made it." Not yet, I thought. The river was only the border. Canada still lay ahead. But in that moment, with her alive in my arms, freedom no longer felt like a dream. It felt like something we could truly hold. If freedom was across a frozen river guarded by rifles, would you risk the crossing or turn back to chains? We crossed into Canada in June of 1855. The road had been long, the blood heavy, but the chains of Alabama could not follow us across that border. The first night we slept in Ontario, the air felt different. It was sharp, clean, and unowned. No overseer's whip cracked in the distance. No bell rang us awake. For the first time, silence was not a cage. It was peace. We built a small cabin near Lake Ontario. Its walls were rough timber, its roof patched with care, but to us it was a palace. Catherine planted a garden in the back, her hands in the soil that once would have been touched only by servants. I set up a forge, shaping iron into tools and nails, earning bread with my own skill instead of under another man's lash. Our days were hard, but they were ours. Catherine learned to cook over an open fire, to sew, to live without the comfort of silk and chandeliers. Her hands grew rough, but her spirit never broke. She was never again her father's daughter. She was my partner, my wife, the keeper of my soul. The years passed, and though we never had children, we became part of a community of former slaves and free families. Together, we built something stronger than walls. We built belonging. We shared our story with those who came north after us, warning them of the cost. 13 men had died so we might live free. Their blood bought every breath we took in Canada. I carried that weight always. Each scar on my body was a reminder. Each night I closed my eyes and saw their faces. Braxton in his silk, Webb by the creek, Blackwood in the snow. I did not glory in their deaths, but neither did I regret them. For freedom is never free. It demands a price. We paid ours in blood. Catherine passed before me in the summer of 1894. Her last words were about the garden she loved. "See how it grows, Tobias," she whispered. "Even in this soil, beauty finds a way." She died in my arms, her hair silver, her face lined, but still radiant with the fire that had carried her from Alabama to Canada. I followed her 3 years later. On our grave, carved into simple stone, are the words, "They chose love over law, freedom over chains, and paid the price." If history remembers us at all, it will likely call us criminals, murderers, fugitives. But in truth, we were only two souls who refused to be told whom we could love, or how long we must kneel. Our story is not about the blood we spilled. It is about the chains we broke. Do you believe love is worth any price, even if the path to it is written in blood? Share your thoughts below.